From the mists of time, the amalgamation of cultures, peoples, and regions has shaped nations and territories alike, but none as unique as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. A vast and diverse nation that spanned from the Baltic to the Black Seas, manifesting an intriguing confluence of political realities and cultural inspirations. A federation of two nations fostered through the Union of Lublin in 1569, the Commonwealth was a beacon of parliamentary governance, a system known as Golden Liberty characterized by a constitutional monarchy, featuring a king elected by the nobility and an assertive legislative body, the Sejm. This pioneering democratic structure was enmeshed with cultural richness, illustrated by religious tolerance and intellectual advancements. The blend of Polish, Lithuanian, Ruthenian, and German elements painted a vibrant cultural mosaic encapsulated in the flourishing of the Renaissance and rise of the Polish cultural identity. Hovering in the shadows of this flourishing nation were the hungry eyes of the growing neighboring powers, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Each harbored their own expansionist ambitions. The Commonwealth's vast, prosperous landscapes, lacking natural protective barriers, were a tempting opportunity, exacerbated by its internal disputes, marking the beginning of a looming storm, the partitioning of the nation. A series of events spanning from 1772 up until its post-Soviet unification in the late 80s with the Third Republic. As dawn broke, in the latter half of the 18th century, an era of calculated avarice and ruthless land seizure began to cast its grim shadow over the Commonwealth. Descending upon the once unified entity like vultures to a carrion, the neighboring powers initiated a series of territorial dissections collectively known as the Partitions of Poland. This triptych of annexations, unfurling from 1772 to 95, not only scribed the fate of the Commonwealth, but also altered the geopolitical contours of Europe forever. The first partition, the one that set the dominoes in motion, was, to no degree, a spontaneous event. A cacophony of disputed successions, religious unrest, and the failed reforms of the Sejm had already corroded the roots of the unified Commonwealth. The teetering political entity was gripped by the Bar Confederation, a rallying call by the Polish nobility against the increasingly menacing Russian and Prussian influences. Yet, despite its valiant endeavor, the Confederation failed to rebuff the foreign mediation. Using the turmoil as a smokescreen, the European behemoths swept in, severing large chunks off the eastern and northern fringes of the Commonwealth. Marking this haunting occurrence, another carve-up of this dying nation broke out in 93, the Second Partition. Only 2 decades had passed since the wounds of the first were inflicted, yet the appetite of the partitioning powers was far, far from sated. This time, the pretext was the belated implementation of the Constitution of 1791, a path-breaking document bristling with so-called liberal ideas of governmental reforms, personal freedoms, and a constitutional monarchy. While a beacon of hope for the beating hearts of the Commonwealth, the Constitution ignited the deep anxieties of the monarchies in the land, fearing the growing contagion of revolution, thus leading to another round of territorial butchery. The Third Partition, the final act in this tragic play, was not merely a territorial annexation. It was the extinguishing of a nation's flame. On October 24, 1795, the once proud Commonwealth was partitioned for the last time. The powers, Prussia, the Habsburg monarchy, and the Russian Empire, carved up the remaining territories of the Commonwealth, erasing it from the map of Europe. This final blow was a direct consequence of the failed Krakow Uprising, a desperate but incredibly brave and noble final attempt at reclaiming independence, had only served to hasten the end. The new authority, viewing the uprising as a threat to their dominance, decided to eliminate the source of the problem, and so the Commonwealth was fractured, its lands absorbed into the territories of the great game of world conquest. This final act was more than just a political event. It was a cultural and social catastrophe. The nation, once a beacon of democracy and tolerance in Europe at the time, was no more. Its people, now unwanting subjects of foreign rulers, were forced to adapt to new laws, speak alien languages, and accept a revised education. Yet, the spirit of these many cultures that made up the vast Commonwealth did not die. The people's identity, forged in the crucible of partition, clung fiercely to their heritage. Their sense of national consciousness, far from being eradicated, was strengthened. The partitions had failed to extinguish the spirit. Instead, they had kindled a flame of resistance, a burning desire for freedom that would, in time, lead to the rebirth of many nations. But that's a story for another day. Napoleon's on the scene, and he's got his greedy eyes on Europe. As we fast forward to 1815, the period of geopolitical cataclysms was far from concluded. Following the Armageddon on the land that was the Napoleonic Wars, Europe found itself stirred into a state of flux. In the eye of this storm, a reshaped Polish entity, the Duchy of Warsaw, emerged, a creation of Napoleon Bonaparte as a puppet state, retaining some pre-revolutionary essence amidst the advancing wave of modernity. The French emperor had grand plans of establishing a pan-European empire with France at its nucleus, and as part of this ambitious strategy, he aimed to weaken Prussia and Russia, utilizing the duchy as a buffer state and potential springboard for his upcoming invasions. Polish soldiers, hopeful for the revival of their state, fought valiantly for the emperor, leaving indelible marks on battlefields as far as Spain and Russia. Their hopes were crushed, however, with Napoleon's downfall at the Battle of Waterloo in June of that year. This resulted in the Congress of Vienna, signed in 1815, and was a meeting of European powers to restore stability and order after the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars. One of the outcomes of this Congress was the creation of a new Polish state under the influence of Russia, and was officially called the rather comical Congress Kingdom of Poland, or simply the Kingdom of Poland. While Prussia also gained some territory known as the Grand Duchy of Posen. Now, thankfully, the Poles enjoyed a limited degree of autonomy in their new kingdom, but they were still subject to the Russian Tsar, and the Russian authorities imposed a policy of Russification, which aimed to erase the Polish language, culture, and identity. Naturally, the Poles resisted this assimilation and tried to preserve their national heritage at all costs. Another important event in Polish history was the establishment of the Free City of Krakow, a small enclave that was protected by the three partitioning powers. The city, also created by the Congress of Vienna, consisted of the physical city of Krakow and its surrounding areas, covering just over 450 square miles. It had its own constitutional assembly, an elected president, and enjoyed a significant degree of autonomy. The Jagiellonian University in Krakow could even accept students from the partition territories of historical Poland, and so the city became a center of Polish political and cultural activity. However, the situation of their cultural identity was still very precarious. They had gained some sovereignty, but were also divided and dominated by foreign powers. The Russian rule was oppressive, the elites were marginalized, and the culture was threatened. These factors sparked a series of rolling rebellions as the Poles fought for their freedom and dignity. One of the most significant among these was the Krakow Uprising of 1846, a revolt driven by a sense of desperation and a desire to restore Polish sovereignty from foreign control. Born amidst an era of fervor and revolution in Europe, the uprising emerged from the embers of the still simmering Polish nationalism. Local leaders sought to expel foreign influence from the city. This was, however, ruthlessly crushed by the overwhelming might of the Austrian Empire with the support of the Russians, once again reaffirming the dominance of foreign powers within historically Polish lands. Krakow, once a free city cherished as a cultural and intellectual hub, was unceremoniously annexed in the immediate aftermath of the uprising. Thus, the city, along with its adjacent territory, was incorporated into the Austro-Hungarian crownland of Galicia. With this, the last semblance of independent Poland was extinguished, and Austrian hegemony further reinforced. These developments understandably left a deep scar on the psyche of the culture. Their struggle for independence had seemingly ended in failure, their hopes dashed, their lands further entrenched under foreign rule. But amidst this despair, the Polish spirit remained undeterred, their resolve only hardened. While the darkness of the partitions and occupation was overwhelming, the promise of dawn was never far away. In the post-World War I era, the roots of Poland's resurgence began to slowly grow. An orchestration of historical events, geopolitical shifts, diplomatic negotiations, and unabated national resistance resulted in the rebirth of the Polish spirit. In the region, the end of the carnage came in 1918, and it marked the collapse of our three historic empires, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, and the Russian. The vacuum created by their downfall opened possibilities for many various national entities trampled under the imperial boot to claim their sovereignty. The Treaty of Versailles not just formally ended the war, but significantly reshaped Europe's national borders. In this dramatic geopolitical reconfiguration, the rebirth of Poland was enshrined as a diplomatic agreement under President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. Point 13 explicitly sought an independent Polish state with access to the sea, a commitment eventually realized under the Treaty of Versailles. Thus was born the Second Polish Republic, with Warsaw as its capital. This sense of national revival, however, was not met with universal acceptance. The interwar period was riddled with territorial disputes, ethnic tensions, and uncertain borders. This resulted in a series of conflicts, such as the Polish-Ukrainian War from 1918 to 1919, the Polish-Soviet War from 1919 to 1921, and the Silesian Uprisings also from 19 to 21. These conflicts were not just about territorial claims, but also about the identity and autonomy of the Polish nation. The Polish-Ukrainian War was a struggle for control over Lviv and eastern Galicia, both regions with significant Polish and Ukrainian populations. The Polish-Soviet War was a fight for the borders of the newly independent nation, with the Soviets aiming to spread the communist revolution to the rest of Europe and Poland looking to secure itself. The Silesian conflicts were a series of 3 armed uprisings by the Polish population in Upper Silesia, who fought to join their homeland at the time, and would later be used by Hitler as one of his many wild reasonings for the upcoming invasion of Central Europe. Despite these challenges, the Second Republic managed to maintain its independence and sovereignty. However, this regained influence was not to last. The war drums were once again beating in Europe, but this time, the effects would be far more devastating for Poland. The 1930s were a time of rising global tensions, as Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler's regime, violated the Treaty of Versailles with continuous aggressive expansion. Hitler wanted to annex the free city of Danzig. That name should not go unnoticed, by the way. And a land bridge through the Polish corridor, an area that gave Poland access to the Baltic Sea. Supported by France and Britain, they refused to give up their territory. Hitler's army had been allowed to take too much. Too many concessions had been given to the ruthless dictator, and he kept taking more. It rings true with the battles of today and Putin's many post-Soviet invasion. But this was the final red line, pushing Europe to the brink of war. Regardless of the warning, on September 1, 1939, they invaded Poland, starting World War II. Their strategy, the Blitzkrieg or lightning warfare, combined fast attacks by land and air, aiming to overwhelm the enemy. The invasion was preceded by a series of false flag operations, such as the Gleiwitz incident, in which German agents staged attacks on German targets and blamed them on Poland. The invasion also triggered the British and French declarations of war on Germany on September 3rd. However, in the east, the Soviet Union was also preparing to invade, following a secret agreement with Germany that greedily divided Eastern Europe between them. The agreement, known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, was signed on August 23rd of that year, and contained a secret protocol that assigned spheres of influence over Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Finland. The Soviet invasion began on September 17th without a formal declaration of war. The Soviets claimed that they were protecting the Ukrainian and Belarusian minorities in Poland from the German aggression. That was tough to say with a straight face. Our lovely Poland was caught between 2 powerful and ruthless enemies, and despite its resistance, it was entirely occupied by October 6th. Some historians have called this event the Fourth Partition of Poland, but this term is not widely accepted or used, but in a way you can see why. Mass murders, forced labor, deportations, and public executions were common, and sadly, from both occupying sides. With the Nazis establishing concentration and extermination camps such as Auschwitz and Treblinka, where millions of poor souls were untimely killed, and with the Soviets also deporting, executing, and suppressing the culture, there was seemingly no light at the end of the tunnel. But the people did not give up their fight for freedom. Underground movements like the Home Army organized acts of defiance, such as the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. Although it failed, the uprising showed the courage and determination of the Polish nation, its hope for liberation, and the fact that its fires were still lit. The uprising was the single largest military operation by any European resistance movement during World War II. It lasted for 63 days, and involved about 50,000 fighters and 200,000 civilians. Supported by the Polish government in exile and the Western Allies, but of course not by the Soviet Union. Nope, they halted their advance near Warsaw and refused to help the insurgents. As a result, the uprising was eventually terribly crushed by the Nazis, who killed about 16,000 fighters, 150,000 civilians, and destroyed 85% of the city in the process. The invasion and occupation of Poland was not just an act of territorial appropriation, it was an attack on their very existence. In the bitter winters of 1945, with the echoes of war receding, a new chapter in the saga of our story beckoned. A nation savaged by successive partitions and brutal occupations now embarked on a path to redefine itself, threading a tightrope between its profound historical scars and aspirations of resurgence. The immediate post-war era was fraught with complex challenges: a ravaged economy, devastated infrastructure, displaced population, and a shift from a multi-ethnic society to a predominantly homogeneous one due to border changes, genocide, and population transfers. Poland's course was further impacted by its strategic location within the Soviet Union's sphere of interest, leading to its establishment as a socialist state under the considerable influence of Moscow. Despite nominal sovereignty, the People's Republic of Poland was heavily tethered to the USSR's political, military, and economic directives, in what is often referred to as the Pax Sovietica period. Amidst this backdrop arose the Solidarity, a trade union movement led by Lech Walesa, that came to symbolize Polish resistance against the ruling communist elite and the Soviet overlordship. Its modus operandi distinguished itself from the violent open revolts of the past, focusing on the power of civil resistance, making it one of the most unique mass-based social movements of the 20th century. The 1980s witnessed the peak tensions between Solidarity and the government, with episodes such as the imposition of martial law in 1981 temporarily disabling the movement. Yet it seemed that the indomitable Polish spirit, tempered by centuries of struggle against subjugation, persisted. The tumultuous decade concluded with the Round Table talks. These negotiations between the communist government and Solidarity represented a turning point, leading to semi-free elections in 1989, and eventually government control passing into the hands of the opposition, the first defeat of a communist regime in electoral contests and a harbinger of the cascading fall of communism across Eastern Europe. Poland, thus, moved into the 21st century as a democratic republic. The succeeding years witnessed a dynamic transformation in its political, social, and economic realms. Its successful transition to a market-based economy, membership in key international bodies such as NATO and the European Union, and skyrocketing living standards catapulted Poland onto the global stage as a vibrant, participatory democracy. Poland's role in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine is significant. As a member of NATO and the EU, it has been a vocal critic of Russia's actions and has provided support to Ukraine in various forms, including humanitarian aid and political backing. The conflict has also led to an influx of Ukrainian refugees, putting a strain on its resources and infrastructure. In the East, their relations with Belarus have been strained due to the ongoing political crisis in the latter country. The authoritarian regime in Belarus has been accused of human rights abuses and election fraud, leading to widespread protests and international condemnation. As we look towards the future, we stand at a crossroads of geopolitical tensions and internal challenges. The nation's historical resilience and adaptability will undoubtedly be tested in the face of these emerging issues. They've been a strong supporter of the democratic movement in Belarus and has provided refuge to many Belarusians fleeing persecution. The crisis at the border, where thousands of migrants have been trying to cross into the EU overland through its mutual borders, has put the nation in the global spotlight. The handling of this crisis will have far-reaching implications for Poland's international reputation and its relations with neighboring countries. In response to these geopolitical challenges, the country has embarked on a rapid militarization process. With plans to double its military spending and build the largest land army in Europe, it's transforming its military into a more capable, mobile, and NATO-compatible force. This expansion is not only a response to the immediate threats, but also a strategic move to assert its position in the region. However, this path is fraught with challenges. The militarization process and the handling of the migrant crisis have raised concerns about human rights and international law. Moreover, the ongoing crisis with Belarus and the conflict in Ukraine have the potential to destabilize the region further. Its role as a mediator and its ability to navigate these complex geopolitical landscapes will be crucial in maintaining peace and stability in the region. The future of Poland is intertwined with the broader dynamics of the region. As it navigates these challenges, its historical resilience, strategic acumen, and commitment to democratic values will be its guiding lights.